And now, it's time for TJwow.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Training Journal webinar. I'm really pleased to welcome you, and it's going to be a fantastic conversation today. Now, I am Jo Cook. I'm the Deputy Editor of Training Journal. I'm going to be hosting the webinar. We'll be on webcam in just a moment with our speakers. Now, the way that we approach our webinars, it's not about our presenters giving you a load of information on a PowerPoint. This is all about conversation, and I love this quote from Jay Cross about conversation being the most powerful learning technology. And what I would really like us to think about is, well, maybe we've been to a conference or a session. I don't know about you, but I always think the best part is the conversation over coffee or maybe in the pub afterwards. So that's what our sessions are all about, is having that conversation. You've got that chat window. We've been using that a little bit already, so please keep going on that. And if you don't have a microphone, it's a great place to be. At the bottom of the screen, we've got a question and answer pod. If you have a specific question, you can pop that in there and we'll make sure we see it. You might not see them all, but I promise I will, and I'll pitch them to our speakers for you. If you want to say something, you've got that raised hand icon at the very top of the screen if you want to use that. And you can also join us on Twitter. We have with us Debbie Carter, who's our lovely editor. She's going to be doing some tweets for us. If you want to join us, then you're more than welcome to do that. Now, I see we've got somebody else who's joined us to the session. We've just started, so welcome to the session. No worries that you haven't missed anything. We're just doing some introductions. Now, all our sessions are being recorded. They're available online in our webinar page on Training Journal. And also, let me just introduce our speakers. We have Peter Carlin from Logic Earth and Laura Overton from Towards Maturity. And I think they're going to have some really interesting conversation and points to make around this talent development of learning and development. So let me go into our
morning, Joe.
screen.
Morning, Laura. Morning, everybody.
Thank you.
The screen. Yes, I'm a joint owner and main protagonist at Logic Earth Learning Services. We were set up 7 years ago. We're based out of Ireland, but with clients all over the world. And our main role is to just really help learning and development professionals, look to the future, try new things, and look at bringing in services that really make an impact in our organizations.
Right, so I'm Laura Overton, and you'll find that you can hear me okay, Jo? Okay, great. Your face was like, oh, I'm Laura Overton, and I head up Towards Maturity, and we are a organisation who helps learning and development professionals prepare for the future of learning. We do research, but we're not currently embraced in data, but we want to look at data to say, okay, what are the insights? How can we prepare for that future, Peter, that you just discussed? So what we do every year is basically a health check for learning and development professionals about what we're doing, how we're achieving it, what kind of technologies we're using, what successes we're having. So we can really use data to share great practice to help us kind of take advantage of some of the things you've already been talking about, Peter.
Great, thank you. And so, let's have some conversation from the chat window. So guys, the conversation flow is entirely up to you. Laura and Peter will completely back me up. We have no agenda. We have nothing set. They keep saying to me, do you have any questions? It's like, No, none at all, because the conversation is...
I guess my main challenge, and I've been working in this industry for about 30 years now, so we've only been doing the research in the last 13 or so, but I guess my main challenge is that as a profession we are such passionate people. We just love our work, we love the people that we serve, and we're really passionate people, and yet we're not passionate about ourselves. We're not passionate about our own skills, and we're often really unconfident about what we can do, what we can bring to business, having conversations with business through technology. So I guess that's my biggest frustration, that we just don't realise what's within us, and we're not bringing that
let
to
me
the
come
party.
to Laura first on that. One main thing that you think is challenging.
Well, I think Laura's completely right. I think there's a lack of strategic thinking, and we need to be looking to the future more and defining where we want to be and having a plan to get there. Now, it's not always the fault of learning and development people that's lacking. I think there's a fault on in the wider industry that we're not supplying them with good enough services to help them do that. So I think there's a wider problem. I think, like Laura and I had a quick discussion earlier, and I think if you look at the vocabulary that we use in the industry, it hasn't changed. I said 20 years and Laura said 30. It hasn't changed in a long time. We were still talking about the same things, but the world is changing, and we have not changed with it. We haven't disrupted what we're doing in learning and development enough at this point. Given the disruption that we see everywhere else. And I think there's a really big opportunity at the minute to look to the next 3, 4, 5 years and to really make a significant step up the ladder, and I mean a number of rungs up the ladder, to really kind of change what we do within learning and development. And I think maybe, I don't want to jump on a bandwagon saying learning and development is dead. It's not. I think the term learning and development might need to change a little, because we're now becoming more
tell me a bit more about that. Is that we're not giving enough
organizations as business
development opportunities to learning and development people, or is it something else?
Actually making an impact and doing things differently, and that means communication, and it means internal marketing. So I think maybe we need to start thinking about the role itself and the skills around it.
Well, this is some of the things that we've been exploring about, high-performing learning teams are doing exactly what you're saying, Peter. They're thinking strategically. They're having conversations with business about the business needs that need to be addressed. And they're thinking in the broader perspective as well. They're thinking beyond the course. One of the things that we found out that those higher performing teams, 94%, a lot of them, practically everybody is saying, my role is to support that performance goal, not just to deliver a course. And that's absolutely critical. And it's increasing. There's an increased awareness amongst the rest of the learning profession that we do need to be doing things differently. And we've just been tracking the data from this year's benchmark, and we found that last year, of learning and development leaders around the globe, I think some 80% of them were saying we've got to start thinking about how do we integrate learning into the workplace? How do we start thinking differently about how we can support performance at that point of need?
Okay, so
that shot up to 91% this year. So there's a definite hunger for us to be doing things differently. Now, what we call ourselves, I agree, it may change, and that is absolutely fine. I don't mind what we're called, to be quite honest, but I believe that we have a role to really influence change within the organisation, and I think there's a real hunger now. But I agree with you, Peter, that on the supply side of the industry there are two major challenges that we've got. We've got the challenge that actually a lot of customers are asking us for what was around 15 years ago, and they're only just catching up with what the supply side was doing. But obviously, to keep in business, you have to respond to customers. So it's all about all of us stepping up our ambitions about what needs to be done and how we work together to do that. And I think that also works internally within organizations. So business leaders need to understand that they need to ask something different of their learning teams. They need to be asking for more than a course, more than just efficiency, because top performing teams are hitting that bottom line: productivity, engagement, reduced attrition rate, the stuff that really matters at the board. People who are doing the stuff that you're talking about, Peter, are delivering those areas. So we all need to change our expectations about what is possible. It's not just supply, it's not just L&D, but it's business as well. We've got to get onto a new page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And Marie, you're preaching to the converted. I go around. I don't know. I've been around hundreds of companies to see how their L&D is working, and that is a very common issue. But you know, again, I would challenge us all to say, well, look, there's a different way of doing things, and it's coming. It's coming with newer technologies, and we just need to have an eye on that and how it's going to come together. And when your organization is kind of resisting change or resisting new ways of doing things, or expecting you to do the old traditional stuff, you know, we can pick small, tiny projects. You know, the whole, you know, pick a battle that we're going to win, and try something new.
Absolutely.
And get
I
some
think
help
it's really
doing it,
interesting
and look at some new kind of methodologies or technologies that are going to do that. And it doesn't have to be complicated. And I think
I quite often
where the
find
future
my
of learning
clients are asking
technologies is going, which is going to enable us to try a lot of new things, is
what we
nearly
might
like
call
an app store-based approach.
Even though, so for instance, I teach a lot about virtual training. So even though that's kind of very new technology for some people, they're asking for things in very old-fashioned formal kind of
all by themselves, without us being involved,
saying, well,
because they're
okay,
good
you know,
enough and they're
maybe
making
we
an
can
impact.
educate
And the
someone
second
here
use then is,
start
well,
with
we can integrate these new services into our learning programs, whereby the formal part of those learning programs actually is relegated to the background,
a few comments
and the
coming
informal
through in
part
the
of those
chat
learning
window. I'm
programs
definitely
become the spine
noting them. I'm
of the
definitely
program,
going to cover
but
them,
the
so
formal
please
and the
don't worry.
resources and the courses are hanging off the
So
spine.
Peter, I
And
want to
I think
come back to kind of what you
that's
were
the
saying
exciting
here.
part for me,
Marie
for new
Duncan makes
technologies
a
that
really
are
good
emerging,
point.
that we
She
can
says
flip
it's a struggle as a manager when you
the traditional on its head
started
a
to
little
make
bit,
that shift.
have the formal there
But the
in our
wider
toolkit, because it's still really
organisation
important.
is nowhere
Classroom
near.
training
Have you
is
seen
still
some of
really
that
important for
yourself,
certain
Peter?
things. Virtual live online classroom is really, really important for certain things. And then we can start introducing other things that really make an impact and are easy to use.
I definitely agree with that, Peter, because we're seeing, again, those higher performing organisations, they're not dropping the formal learning, but they're doing exactly what you said, and they'll be training their classroom trainers to use the technology also in the classroom environment. So if you're creating apps or toolkits or job aids, they'll be introduced first in the place where they're gathering cohorts of people together, but they're introducing them to the things they're going to be using back in the workplace. They'll then be using technology to extend that learning experience, that transfer of learning. Again, I think it was over 9 out of 10 of us are saying, you know, it's really important for us to get into how to help individuals apply the learning, not just attend the courses. And these are the sorts of things that we can start in the classroom. They're also training up their trainers as well to use what's already gone on online before they actually attend the classroom. We're in the middle of writing a report right now about how do you transform the formal learning, and everything that you've said, it works. Basically, it actually works. And I think one of the things that we need to be more confident on, and I think Fiona, you asked about fear a little bit earlier, and I think we're frightened of shaking up the status quo. So sometimes you have to start a place of familiarity and then take one step rather than just jump into the future of where you think everyone else is, and to move towards that. And I think we need to build up our own confidence to think about what are the things that we do feel strongly about. We understand reflection, we understand, you know, the opportunity to create opportunities for people to actually do things in order to learn. We understand that in the classroom environment. So all that technology allows us to do is to extend what we just know intuitively into a place where staff will be able to actually apply it right there, right then at the point of need. So it's that kind of shift. We've got to let go some of our fears, our own fears as well. And I think just one other point I would make on that is that you talked about the consumer aspect. We've found over the last 5 or 6 years that almost 2/3 of learning professionals say that the reason their big ideas for technology don't work is because their staff won't want to engage with online learning. And I'm like you, Peter. I'm like, I don't think this is actually what's going on. So in the last 3 years, we've actually got data in from 30,000 colleagues, staff members, all kinds of people, directors, line managers, you know, from the top of the organization spread right through, doing all kinds of different jobs. And you know what technology is right on? They are consumer technology people, and they are using, you know, their tools to actually do what they just to do their job, with or without the help of learning and development. So we do need to be tuned into our staff. We do need to be tuned into what they're actually doing for themselves, not just how they respond to what we're doing.
Laura, and it's such a great point, because we, as service providers to the industry and then service providers internally, we need to be developing these consumable services that meet or exceed the experience that they have at home. And the problem is that we haven't been doing that. And if you look at the 4 walls of the old LMS, and the horrible old click next content that we've been providing, no wonder where people are going, oh, this is not working. You know, we need to get away from that and present new experiences that exceed or meet the quality and the standard of the internet experiences that we're having outside of work. And you know, again, when I talked earlier about aspiration, we need to aspire to do that, and we actually need to go beyond that by actually doing it. You know, so but it's such an exciting time, because I think the technology is starting to catch up. We're starting to see light at the end of that tunnel. We're starting to see these experiences coming through and examples of it coming through. You know, and up until now, we've really just been talking about it. We've been talking about gamification and social learning, which are just buzzwords. They're buzzwords for saying we need to have better conversations in our organizations. We need people to share information by talking to each other. You know, so the technology should very, very, very subtly help us do that without it looking like, oh, it's social learning or it's gamification. You know, the technology should just be very subtly complementary to all of that.
Absolutely, and it's about the journey of the individual. And one of the challenges I think we have in terms of building our own talents, building our own skills, our own confidence in this world, is because whether it's not always the supply side of the industry, it's actually can be anyone who we like to throw a buzzword in. We throw in a model. You know, we love a good model in learning and development. We love, social, what's the hot thing? You know, at the beginning of the year, what's on trend? It's going to be gamification. It's going to be AI. It's going to be virtual reality. It's going to be 70-20-10. It's going to be, we just love it because we're hungry to see change, and we think that if we can grasp hold of one of these things, then we will see the long-term change that we want to achieve in business, that learning culture, that recognition, the opportunity to connect and engage with business in a more meaningful way. But the problem is, and I got data coming out my ears proving this, and so it really frustrates me. So this will be my second challenge, Joe, rather than just one. The problem is that we hang our hat on a silver bullet. And when you hang your hat on a silver bullet, you put all your faith, all your energies into that one thing. And you forget what else is needed all the way around it. It also polarizes people. So there are those who say, of course, gamification will never work in my organization. And those who say it's only social. And so it polarizes opinion. You get infighting in the industry about those who do and those that don't. Makes a great reading in magazines and online, like Training Journal. But actually, it doesn't actually help us. And what we've found is those top performing learning organizations, they are, of course, they're aware of these things, but they're always looking at it in the context of what does my business need to achieve and how do I connect in faster, simpler ways to my learners so that I can just help them do their job faster and better. That's the filter that allows them to make great decisions. And we were talking, doing a webinar in Australia, the crack of dawn actually, yesterday morning at our time. And Michelle Ockers from Coca-Cola was there, and she had been through the benchmark process with us. And the benchmark does flag up some of the things that we've been talking about to consider. And she said, you know, mobile learning for us is important. But it's not important right now, but we need to keep aware of it so that when we're ready for it in our organisation, and instead they were moving down a different route. But the reason that her route was successful was because it was aligned to what the business needed. And that's got to be the filter that we apply to this. And that's where we need to build our own talent and our own skills in that space. Sorry, I get a bit passionate about these things.
That is a very, very good thing. And you've got some comments coming through. The people, Marie just says, so blinking true, Laura. Learn Koch or Con from Australia, Con says, Laura is so on the money. And the same goes for gamification and VR. And it's really interesting. I mean, this wasn't necessarily a discussion just about technology. But technology is such a big, important part of our lives now that we can't kind of necessarily separate out these threads. And we all use technologies to varying degrees. And that is part of being a modern learning and development professional. Doesn't mean you have to be absolutely up to date with the latest VR concept and how you're going to use it. Possibly not. Should you know a little bit about it, what the potential future is and how that's going to affect your career? Yes, absolutely, of course. Peter, what are your thoughts on, so I'm coming back to what Marie said a little bit further up in the chat window. So we were talking a little bit about kind of managers and projects and starting small. And Marie's got a really nice point here that I think really focuses us. And Marie says, Peter's point is spot on about small battles that I'm likely to win. What is the role of a leadership program around shifting culture? This is a direction I'm thinking about at the moment, but I'm cautious of the risks. The leadership program culture will eat strategy for breakfast. So, you know, feel free to add to this, Marie, as we continue talking. I have an opinion that actually to create any big change, any proper change in an organisation, really needs to come absolutely from the top. As
it's
one
really good.
L&D
I think,
person,
you know, as L&D professionals, we need to understand what the top 3 or 4 business objectives are for, you know, from the business strategy. And if part of that is, you know, behavioural change or you know, a change of direction within the business, then we need to be right on our game and thinking of how we're going to help facilitate that as L&D professionals. But I don't think we can instigate change programs without it coming from the top, Joe. And you know, and then it comes down then to how we actually go about doing that. You know, we come back to then, or you know, what is in our L&D toolkit to best do that. And you know, change programs are probably the hardest ones to really construct a really good solution around, because you know, it has to have really important conversations, and they can't all be digital. So it's a challenge for us to really, and again, as Laura said earlier, but having the confidence as L&D professionals to sit down and say, we understand what the business is requiring here. We will sit down and think of a really kind of effective and impactful solution, and then be confident about going back to the business and presenting it to say, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, and building that confidence is so important. And I think that's one of the things that we found is that people love to hear stories. But because we're quite fearful, we think, well, that's a great story for that organisation, but it won't work for me. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of kept us motivated in doing the work that we do at Towards Maturity, is that not that we're just churning out data for 13 years, but when you hear a great case study and a great story and think, would it work for me? And the ability to then go back and say, well, actually, there are some patterns in this case study that have worked for hundreds and hundreds of organizations around the globe, big, small, that gives us then the confidence to be able to say, you know what, maybe we need to try something a little bit different. And, Levi's posted a link to a report that we did on leadership training. And what was really interesting was just in the data in that report shows how 2,000 leaders, directors, senior managers and managers in businesses are using different technologies to help them do their job. So it meant that learning leaders who read that report have got a bit of evidence to actually go back and say, I know you've asked for this because you've always had for the last 30 years, but here's some evidence. Is it worth us trying something new? So the role of evidence in helping us to challenge the internal status quo and give us that kind of little courage to be able to do that, I think is really important, because I think we have a role to play in influencing culture. It needs to come to the top. When it comes to learning culture, we can do exactly what you said earlier. We can be thinking about, well, how can we influence learning culture from within the places where we've already got a stake on. Leadership programs are a great example of this. If we start to encourage leaders through the formal, in inverted commas, programs that actually learning takes place on the job, it's about communities, it's about sharing, and it's introducing that. We do the same in our induction programs and people come on board, that actually it's normal for us to connect with people, to create social networks, to be active in reflecting on what we're learning day on day. We are playing a little part in shifting that learning culture game. So I agree that culture change has to come from the top, but
again, my
we can
experience
use
is a lot
evidence
around blended
to
learning
influence
programs
the
and
top
virtual
decision
classrooms
makers,
and
but we
use
can
of technology
also
and
use
social
that
media
evidence to
is actually
make,
once they've
just to
experienced
demonstrate
it,
what that means
wow,
in the
we
small
could do it
projects that we
here,
are
we could do it
involved in.
here, and we could do this. So therefore, exactly as Laura says, it's about using evidence, but also our skills. Now, I know Fiona that I was chatting to on this about a little while ago was saying, maybe we need to help people or businesses or L&D departments get into that mindset. So is that a particular skill? Is that kind of different from instructional design? Is that different from facilitation? Is this, as we're talking about, you mentioned earlier on, Laura, about the business strategy, is it about that? Is it about something else? So Peter, let me come to you first, and I'll come back to Laura.
Yeah, I think I think it is a different mindset. I think again, as I said earlier, we can start thinking in new ways because there are new tools coming to us very soon. I think, Marie's point about, leadership change really is probably a good example of where our skills are tested the most, because, there is a big mix of formal, and if we are starting to introduce more informal things into that learning program, into that mix, we really have to be at the top of our game. To be great facilitators and to be dipping into the program and dipping out at the very right times, and to encourage those discussions in between the formal classroom training courses. So that really does test our skills as L&D consultants. And we're not trainers anymore. We are modern day learning consultants who are adept and comfortable around that breadth of that toolkit. And that's if we're looking at our own skills and our own personal development as L&D professionals, that I think is a good way to think about it, which is, am I adept or am I comfortable around a very broad range of skills now? Because as in the past, it was very, very narrow skill set, and I think now the skill set is very diverse, which is a good thing for us. It's a good thing for us to be really pushing ourselves on and looking at those strategies and tactics that helps nudge or motivate or just gather a little bit of momentum around those informal discussions.
I would agree with that, and the skill set is so much broader now. It's one of the things that we've been tracking. So people who go through the Towards Maturity benchmark, we're looking at the tactics. You assess yourself against the tactics of high-performing teams and look at the skills that we need in order to deliver those tactics, so you kind of get a profile of where you can improve. Performance consulting is absolutely one of those skills that people are saying now that we need within our team. The ability to facilitate social. You mentioned it earlier, Peter, about the ability to market, communicate, to have strategic conversations with business, to be able to blend instructional design. There are probably about 15 skills that we track now that are that the learning profession, we ourselves believe that we need, and yet we then don't. We can see what we need in the same way that we can see what our organisations need, and yet we do not then invest opportunities for ourselves to do it. And I think, Con, you just talked about, why are we not making progress in this area? And I think there is a sense of cobbler's children here, very much so. Earlier this year, we have seen in our data that there's a real sense of understanding change needs to come, but complete inaction. I think one of the things that we were thinking about at Towards Maturity is that because we've got all of the big picture in our minds now, we do know we need to do performance consulting, we do know apps are coming, we do know that our consumers are changing, everything's changing, but because we've got so much of that in our minds, it's almost debilitating. It's almost like having the big picture on a jigsaw box, knowing where we want to go, and then on the inside all of these pieces, and we just don't know where to start. And I think we identified a few ideas. Look, just start somewhere. Maybe it's working directly with business leaders just to understand what they're looking for, just work on that. Or one of the suggestions was just start looking at your own skills of your L&D team. Start to use some of these benchmarking opportunities, these skills maps that are out there. Let's build those skills up. Let's do what we think we ought to be doing for our customers inside our own teams. First of all, personal knowledge networks, use of technology, start to reflect. It's not all about classroom training, but it's about being intentional about exploiting every opportunity we have to learn, and we should be starting with that. And I think if we do that to Con's address, then we'll start to want to apply it in the solutions that we're creating, and I think that they may get a breakthrough. I hope we get a breakthrough.
Can I just back that up? Can I give you all a place to go and get started? Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you all remember a guy called Stephen Walsh, who used to be one of the co-founders of Kineo. Stephen Walsh is creating a brilliant little app at the minute. He hasn't got a name for it yet, but it's a little It's a little content curation tool which will blow your mind. And this is one of the apps that we will integrate into our learning ecosystem, but hopefully you can get your hands on it before then. Go to anderspink.com and sign up for his little content curation tool, and you'll see a consumable service that we can offer our learners right now, right here, as a tool that they go and use themselves for their own topics. And this is one tiny example of where the future of learning is going to be. So.
And it's great, and that's the kind of thing, Peter, that we can download and start using for ourselves. Because I know that the Steves have actually curated a lot of content around learning and development. I know they've used a lot of our content within that, but we need to start knowing what we need to look at and use those kinds of tools, because they open up such a big world that we have to start saying, okay, well, how will I apply that to me? And I think another thing that helps you apply that, look at this bigger, is to again look at some of the evidence that's around, or even use the benchmark to kind of think through all of these bigger issues in order to get them in a line. What's the priority? We can't do everything at once. So just stopping, taking time out and reflecting, I think is important. And then those tools in our hands, like the Anders Pink app, suddenly we can use them rather than play with them.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the challenges that we have with technology, is that we tend to play, we pilot, we play, and then they don't dig in. And I think where the shift will come is when we start to use something to help us do something better. And I absolutely agree that that app could be kind of gold dust in our hand if we choose to use it rather than play with it.
Well, it's a tool that makes an impact.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's important, based on what the conversation has been progressing on, and well done, Laura and Peter, magnificent conversation, and something dear to my heart, which is the professional development of the L&D members, the team members. I think we talked about performance consulting, but I think curation for me is one of those I call the sleepers. I think we start moving to the curation space a lot more, and things like Peter, the Anders.
Thanks, Carlin. You said a little bit earlier on in the chat window about performance consulting, that maybe there was an issue around the buzzwords of that. Now, we've addressed some of the language a little bit, but tell us a bit more about why you think that's a buzzword and a bit of a barrier.
There's a tool right there for you, Anders Pink. It just can curate the content for you. You don't have to recreate it, and then you can use it as a supporting tool on your enterprise social network, where you can actually push content from Anders Pink onto your Yammers, onto your SharePoints, and it can help you, get some content out there. And I think, just like performance consulting, I think curation is another one that we need to focus on in relation to building up that skill. And then how do we, like Laura said, how do we apply it? How do we start using it and making traction with that in the organisation? So I think for me, they're the two key ones, performance consulting and curation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. Well, Fiona started the conversation. I think it was a very good point. Sometimes we don't talk the language of the business, and although performance consulting is a business term, and I would hope that most business professionals would know it, I think Fiona made a very good point about, let's just start having a conversation. Let's talk about the impact, and that's why I start my conversations with, okay, what's the performance issue you're experiencing? Is it a behavioural change you want to look at? Is it a widget measure you want to focus on? Is it something else that we need to agree on what the outcome we desire? But bring that up front. Bring that up front in the conversation. I don't move on any initiative. I don't move into design or delivery phase or any phase unless I've got agreement signed off by the business on the measure of success. What's the data? What data we're going to use? Who's going to collect it? How are we going to collect it? When are we going to collect it? And when we're going to report? You get those things lined up earlier on, the rest of your process, hopefully, fingers crossed, can start to sort of evolve, and at least you've got an anchor coming back to, and the business knows what you're going to provide to them. But Fiona makes a very good point about the buzzword. Yes, we use performance consulting, but let's just have a conversation. Hey, George, Mary, what's your issue at the moment?
Thank you very much, Carlin. You are absolutely an expert, and everybody has a voice on our webinar. So thank you so much for sharing that so eloquently. And I think it's really an interesting point about having a conversation. I agree with you. And Fiona said something similar in the chat window. She said, "Well, what can we do to help your team? Help this business just start a conversation." But what I find interesting,
got more to say about it than me.
Talking about the development of L&D and our talent, is there's a lot of difference between what we might know as let's start a conversation and what other people start as a conversation, which is then just, yes, what's your training need? Yes, when do you want the training delivered? Now, I think if we've had a little bit more experience, if we have had some more reading, some more exposure to these things, then we know we have to have a slightly different conversation, like Fiona says, about how can I help your team or the business, or like Con was saying about asking why to get to the bottom of things. But I think there's a challenge of getting to people that haven't heard that message yet. So, Peter, what are you thinking about that challenge of people who perhaps haven't heard that message just yet?
Joe, I go out and visit. I love what I do. I'm a business owner, but I'm primarily a learning consultant. And I go out to see, hundreds of different companies, and there are two main themes that are really going on about what L&D people are talking about, what they need, and those conversations. And there's two things. And one is they know we need to make an impact on the business. That's a given. We have to do something. We have to be leaders and performance consultants and making an impact on the business. And the second thing is that we have to do it efficiently. We are no different to a production process. We're no different to any other industry whereby we have to be effective and efficient. And that's maybe a problem that we've had in the past. We haven't really got the joke that is, we have to make an impact at a low cost per head. And that's what all of those people that I'm talking to, that's the theme across what they're saying to me. And basically what they're saying to me is, surely there's a better way. Surely there's a better way of doing this. We have induction programs all the time. We haven't made them efficient. We haven't made them impactful and efficient at the same time. We still have to do our standard training stuff around compliance. Okay, why are people still not enjoying it? Why are they just, doing it and getting out of there? So we have to start making a difference. And the skills that we need to do that now are different. And the skills that we need to do that are, having a really clear plan in place to look at the 80% of things that happen every year in our organizations, year on year on year, and making those self-service, making those efficient, and making those hands-on and easy to get to with a brilliant user experience. Now that then leaves us as L&D professionals with time to look at the other 20% of the things that happen in business on a day-to-day basis that we're not expecting, and time to think about the real business strategy. So I think if we were to come into our jobs every day thinking of, okay, how am I going to make the stuff that we know is going to happen every year more effective, more impactful, better user experience, and more efficient, and then how am I going to spend time looking at, ad hoc business requirements and being really good at that, and being agile and being fresh and being, bringing new thinking to that, but also how am I making an impact on the business?
And I think that impact is so important. As you say, I so agree. We all know we want to do that, and we all know of ways we might be able to achieve it. But it's starting up the conversation. I was really noting Marie's point earlier about the challenge of when you're so busy. How do you shift focus, if you haven't got that impact data, I'm using that in inverted commas, that because I think learning professionals, we feel that we only have the right to talk about impact if we can take something that's proven that what we've done adds impact back to the business. And often, because that's so tough to measure, it's one of the things that contributes to our fear of not talking about it. And it's one of the reasons the only thing we talk about is the efficiency gains we've given people. If we go around talking about efficiency gains in the business the whole time, we're going to just be seen as a cost centre. And if you're a cost centre and the pressure's on, you're going to be cut. So we've got to break out in terms of developing our own confidence and releasing the talent that is genuinely within us. We've got to find a new way of breaking out of that kind of fear mentality. And it's been very interesting for us because a lot of the research that we do, as Con says, we start with what impact you're trying to make. We say, are you achieving that? What are you doing? And if you are achieving it in any way, have you assessed the extent to which you've made an improvement? But what does that mean? What that means is there's external evidence that's out there now, based on 300, 400, 500, 700 individuals who said, actually, by doing things differently, by doing the things we've been talking about today, we've seen an average 12% improvement in productivity. We've seen attrition rates drop by 9%. We've seen the ability to roll out new systems, products, processes speed up by 25%. Now, they're not your stats. But equally, they're not one person's stats where you could say, well, they could, of course they can do that because look at who they are, look at their budget or whatever. These stats on average have a minimum of 300 organisations around the globe, not for profit, all that kind of thing. When you're armed with that kind of information, you can have a different conversation. So if you're really tight, and how do you get your business to actually think about you differently? Just sharing that. It's external evidence. It's independently calculated. Share it and say, look, others are doing this by doing things differently. If we just achieve a quarter of that, 3% improvement in productivity, is it worth us looking at new ways that we can be working together, business leaders and learning leaders? Can we have a conversation? That is very practical. We don't have to be tying ourselves up in knots. We use what's around us in order to just open that up. I've had just a couple of anecdotes that have been shared with me because I wish I could gather it and someone will tell me how to. But people who've changed their jobs, got promotions internally because they've used the evidence in the tools maturity reports to inspire them to say, I think we can do something different. Give me a go, give me a try. I've had 2 people in different parts of the world who've come back to me and said, thank you for my pay rise. I go, oh, cheers. Do share. But they're using evidence when they haven't got that evidence themselves, but the external evidence backs up what they're looking to do.
Yeah, Laura, it's so true, and I think the other problem in the industry typically is that a lot of medium to large size companies do not have a big L&D team. They're under-resourced, and they don't have time to measure. They don't have time to reflect. They don't have time to analyze the data. So in the absence of that time, you need to be a brilliant marketeer. You need to be creating smoke and mirrors around what you're doing, and you need to be a great communicator. And if you do that, that's why I think modern day L&D professionals need to have 3 core skills. One is core solid L&D foundations. The other one is communication skills, and the other one is blatant promotion of what you're doing. And Laura makes the point really well today. It's around confidence. And so in those organizations where there isn't a huge amount of resources, you're going to have to find that confidence to really make a change in your role.
One of the things, I won't talk too long, Joe, trust me. But one of the things that we found in our top performing learning companies is that they are not the companies with the biggest budgets and the biggest teams. We've got charities that are in there, public sector organisations, but they're the ones with the attitude to say, I haven't got very much, so therefore I'm going to tune into what the business needs and I'm going to use what I've got in smart ways to solve a problem. That's what makes a top performing organisation. And it's, we just got to open up our minds to, as I say, the talent within us, and to release that onto the business problem that's at hand within the organisation, rather than look kind of like longingly at the latest buzz thing that's going on in the L&D industry. That to me is what will unleash our opportunity, unleash our potential in the future.
Great, thank you. And I think those things are really important in terms of attitude and confidence and moving forward. So if you think back over your careers, both of you, can you think of a couple of things that maybe you've done or that happened that would have given you that confidence? So I'm going to give you a moment to think about that, because I'm going to share one of those myself. And actually one of mine was about being made redundant. And I was made redundant. I had a great reputation, I think, so people told me, inside the business I was working in. But outside of it, I didn't have any. I didn't have any personal learning network. I wasn't doing the Twitter or the LinkedIn thing. Not that that's the only way of doing it, but I wasn't. And I remember going to the Learning Technologies Conference and the free exhibition about 5 years ago, which is where I met you, Laura, that first time, and also Debbie, our editor, who's on the session today as well. And just going around with that open-minded attitude of, what can I do? Who can I meet? What conversations can I have? What can I learn? And I met Ben Betts that day, who heads up Curator and focuses on MOOCs and stuff like that. I had no clue what a MOOC was. I had no idea about XAPI. None of these things. And it was almost like this baptism of fire into the industry rather than just being a trainer.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back as you asked the question. Back before I started Logic Earth, I used to work for Ireland's largest IT training company, and my very first customer that was given to me was HP down in outside Dublin, and my customer, a guy called Tony White, was really my mentor at the time, and he gave me that light bulb moment and that help and that kind of view of the world. That is, there are so many other things out there that we need to be doing as L&D professionals. He was really driving L&D for the business. He was really driving the strategy of L&D towards the business strategy. And you could see that, and he was trying new things, and we were doing blended learning programs back in 2002, 2003 that were really impactful. And it was at that moment that the kind of my view of the world of learning and learning technology and learning development strategy and impact really exploded for me, and I wouldn't have been here today without that year of working with Tony.
I think for me, it's hard going after YouTube because, sort of absolutely the networks, the people you surround yourself with. And so we're a passionate industry, and there are amazing people in this industry who are really open to connecting with people. And I was surrounded by people like Charles Jennings and kind of Jane Hart from the earliest days, just great people. But equally working in an organisation like yourself, Peter, you're challenged by seeing and working with people who are pushing you. So I would agree with both of those. Those stretch assignments are really, really important. But I guess for me, just thinking about it, it was also about my confidence came when I started. I didn't realize what I was doing. It was kind of unintentional, but I started to actually read more evidence reports about what was going on in the industry and started to think those through. And I started to articulate evidence rather than when I wanted to challenge something or wanted to open a conversation. I found that the evidence that I had in my hands at the time, so it's in 2000, late 90s, helped me have that confidence. But it was then that I realized that perhaps some of the evidence that would have given me even more confidence to have a conversation just wasn't around, which I guess was the kickstart of starting the Towards Maturity work that we're doing. But for me, knowing what else is going on there, knowing some numbers, being able to use those to stimulate conversations, to stimulate myself, actually gave me the confidence and my conviction. So actually, I'm not alone here. I can do this. So to me, it was, it's the networks, it's the stretch assignments, but it's also stepping out on firm foundations from independent research as well that personally has led me down my direction that I've taken in the kind of L&D world.
Thank you. And it's interesting how we can have such different experiences, but it's really that kind of, as you say, that stretch assignment.
Jo, you're there.
Just thinking, yeah, exactly. She'll be coming back. Marie, you were talking about a top tip for L&D managers at the beginning of their journey, tuning into the organisation and turning the organisation around. And I think that's, confidence is part of that. But Peter, what would your top tip for Marie be?
That's a really good question. I said, Marie, I would definitely be very selfish about what you want to do, and for your own personal development and for the business is set a statement of intent to say, okay, we're at the start, we're at the beginning, it's going to be tough, but we want to do things differently, and we want to do things that make an impact, and we want to make that efficient, and we want our learners to just love what we do, and we want the business to say, hey guys, look, you're up there with the rest of the business support functions, and just be very selfish about that. And as we said earlier, have the confidence to take that first step, pick a battle that you can win, try a new piece of technology, find a partner that's going to help you do it, try and ignore the buzzwords and find things that are really practical. If it's not going to work, don't do it. If it's not a great user experience, definitely don't do it. It's 90% user experience and 10% something else. And I think that would be my top tip.
Yeah. I think for me as well, you have to start somewhere, and I think that's absolutely great. But I mean, I would also say set yourself a baseline as well. Sort of working through something like the Towards Maturity benchmark or one of the L&D audits, but just work through, do a reflective exercise. Where are you now? That will give you that evidence base to have that confidence to take that conversation forward. But it also means that you can come back next year and track, okay, well, what am I going to concentrate on next? So, keep a baseline. Be smart about encouraging yourself. If you're a small department, using external peer evidence will help you know that you're on the right track whilst you are fighting these battles and winning the internal things that Peter's been doing. So balancing the two together will keep you sane, smart, and moving in the right direction.
My experience is to go out with that consultancy approach, that relationship building, have a conversation to get to the bottom of things. And I found I wasn't a manager, but when I was in an L&D team, and Laura, that's where you came in and helped us in that organisation, I found that consultancy approach with our internal clients made a huge difference to how we were perceived, because people were saying to me, wow, I've never been approached like this before. Everybody's just always thrust me in the way of the LMS or something like that. So that I found was really, really important. Okay, so what we need to do then is just make sure we are finishing up on our last few questions. So very, very, very quickly. I have a great question from Levi. Should L&D be entirely responsible for their own development? So really quickly, Laura, what do you think?
Well, if we're not, who else will be? I do think business leaders ought to put pressure on learning and development to be the best they can. That's a story for another day. But, until then, the department and us as individuals, absolutely, we need to be responsible for taking our own medicine and moving on in the industry. Peter.
Thank you, Laura.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. We need to find, we need to have pressure, but we also need to go out and do what we do best and find a good mentor as well. Would really, give you that injection that you need.
Yeah. Someone to sound off and share your ideas with.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Great. I think those things are important.
Marie's asking how to find a mentor, and I think, Marie, it's down to us finding the confidence to just look outside the four walls of our office or our buildings and to start networking with people. And you can do that on Twitter, you can do it in different networks. Sometimes it's not easy, but you have to take a step forward on that.
Sometimes you have to just ask. I know that I asked someone after hearing a story about mentoring, and I'm practically sitting next to someone who I knew really well, but I never have thought in a million years they would even be interested. And I just asked him, I said, would you mind doing that for me? He said, it would be a pleasure. And I'm like, oh, wow. I was so glad I was sitting next to that person at that point in time. So it's just asking, because you might say, I can't, but I know somebody else who you might be able to approach. So definitely ask.
Yeah, I think when we were starting up the business 6, 7 years ago, you know, the big surprise for me was when I started speaking to people about I'm going to try something new here, that the people were so willing to help and so willing to come forward and give you a helping hand. And you know, that will be the same in any enterprise. So if you're asking for help, or if you're saying to people, I'm starting something new here, I need help, you know, Laura's right. Ask and you will not be turned down.
I know we're almost at time now, but Fiona, you were asking about what L&D is going to look like. I have a hope of what it's going to look like. I think we're going to be opportunity to be connected, to be engaged, and to be really driving through performance. We may not be called L&D. I've got a fear that it may well look like what it looks like today, but smaller budgets being pushed more and more into a corner. The choice, I believe, is ours and what we make of our own talent and our opportunities. Peter, what's your view? Because I know the time's up almost.
Yeah, I think so. I think technology is going to help us become more impactful and more efficient. And it's going to give us a breath of fresh air and a breathing space to look at more strategic programs for the business.
Perfect.
Thank you. So can you hear me, guys?
Yeah, you better round up.
Oh. This is always great, isn't it, when the host's webcam fails and you can't hear them. But luckily, I'm with two consummate professionals who just continued. So thank you so much for that. And it just goes to show there are always challenges in technology, no matter how well you know about them and what's going on. So thank you so much, guys. You've done an amazing job today. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Peter, as well. So let me just kind of wrap up, and we can webcam now and ignore that the mine wasn't working very well. So Peter and Laura, thank you so much for your time today. There's some links in the bottom of the information that we've got here, including Laura's website and on Twitter, and also Paul's website and on Twitter, if you want to kind of find out a little bit more about them. So really interesting conversation, guys. We could talk about this all day. Now, we've been asked, where will the recording be? They will be all on the Training Journal website. The link to the recording webinar is in that links box at the bottom. Also, you can continue the conversation on Twitter if you want to. That's absolutely no problem. And the next webinar is August the 11th, and what we're talking about is technology. So we'll release a few more details about this on our website nearer the time. We have Paul from Learning Pool in Ireland. He's coming along to our discussion, and some more as well. So we've touched a bit on technology today. So have a think about, is there more that you want to talk about on technology another day? So thank you so much, Laura. Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you, everybody in the chat window. And if you came on the microphone as well, an absolutely great conversation. And thank you very much.